part 2 for your lesson for 4-1, the inverse variation reciprocal function. Reciprocal function is going to map every non-zero real number to its reciprocal. So it's basically going to be a mapping of all the possible values with your inverse variation. So example 4, what we're starting out with, how do you graph the reciprocal function y equals 1 over x? So I'm going to look at a table of values here. So for every value that I pick for x, the reciprocal is going to be the y. So for example, I'm going to start with the easy one. If I start with 1, y is 1 over 1, which is just 1, because the reciprocal of 1 is 1. If x is 2, y has to be 1/2. If x is 3, y is 1/3, and so on. I can also do this the other way. For example, if x is 1/2, y would have to be 2, because the reciprocal of 1/2 is 2. If x is 1/3, y would have to be 3. And on the flip side of that, all the negatives also apply. So if x is -1, y is -1. If x is -2, the reciprocal is -1/2. If x is -3, reciprocal is -1/3. If we look at -1/2, it gives me a -2. -1/3 would give me -3. There's actually only one value you cannot plug in for x, and that would be the value that makes your fraction undefined. And that's 0. You can't have 1 over 0 because that does not exist. So 0 is not a possible value we can plug in, nor is it a y value we can get back, because remember the x and the y can switch position here. So I have 1, 1, 2, 1/2, 3, 1/3, 1/2 puts me up at 2, 1/3 puts me up at 3, and you actually end up with something very similar to that. And then on the negative side, -2, -1/2, -3, -1/3, -1/2, -2, -1/3, -3, and those all end up like that. There are imaginary lines that are running horizontally and vertically. No, I said that backwards. The line x equals 0 runs vertically. The line y equals 0 runs horizontally. And those are what we call asymptotes. This is actually a y here. Asymptotes are imaginary lines that your graph typically does not cross, but it's describing the end behavior. It's describing where your graph is heading, what direction it's going. You'll find when you get to calculus, there are sometimes asymptotes that are crossed, but they still generalize that end behavior. For what we're doing in this class, they're not going to be crossed. So again here, asymptote is your line that a graph approaches. Typically, it is not going to be crossed. And that leads us to this example 5. It says, graph the function below. What are the equations of the asymptotes and what are the domain and the range? This is taking the graph that we just did and shifting it. So remember we talked about our h's and k's in previous sections. Your k value is what's on the end. So that's actually going to be shifting our graph up 2. Our h value is a +3, so that is actually going to be shifting our graph to the right. So we are going to take the graph of 1 over x, and we are going to move it right 3 and up 2. Because of the formula, 1 over x minus h, and then plus k. So if I look at all of those graphs, I'm going to go back through and graph what I just did, and then I'm going to graph the new one. had that. So that's the graph of 1 over x. So every single one of those points, I am going to move to the right 1, 2, 3, and up 1, 2. So this one is going to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. This one is going to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. This one, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So it's going to look same shape, just shifted. This one, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. This one, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Let's try to do that a little bit better. So you can see here, the lines that I'm not crossing now are the vertical line of x equals 3 and the horizontal line of y equals 2. So those are your asymptotes. My vertical asymptote is x equals 3. My horizontal asymptote is y equals 2. Notice those come from the h and the k values. Whatever the k value is, that's going to be a horizontal asymptote. Whatever the h value is, that's going to be a vertical asymptote. My domain is all reals except 3 because that's the asymptote value. My range is all reals except 2 because, again, that is an asymptote value. In 4-2, we'll look at graphing these a little bit more. That's going to be heavier on the calculator, though. We're not going to look at a whole lot of the intricacies with the rational functions. There are a couple key things, though, that I do want to point out, so I do want to make sure we go over that. This is a very important lesson because it does kind of set up our chapter with rational functions. So please make sure you go back and watch this. Go back through. Make sure you slow down on anything that you're not quite sure of. There should be some extra Khan Academy videos you can go through and watch if you need some extra help on this. And reach out to me if you have any questions.